What's up, y'all? You're listening to the My Aggie Nation podcast. I'm Alex Miller with the Eagle. Up there or down here, I don't know which one is it's showing, but that's Travis Brown. He's also of the Eagle. One might say. What's up, Travis?
Not much. Just I'm working remote today, so we have a little bit of a Zoom situation instead of our normal studio set. But glad that I could be with you, even if it's over the interwebs.
Travis, it's been a while since we've done a podcast. A lot has happened. You actually were away, I think it was last week about this time, entrenching yourself in what they call an Aggie's first tradition, aka fish camp. That's because your wonderful wife, Lauren, was a namesake, of course. Travis, I just want to know, what was the fish camp experience like for you?
It was actually an absolute blast. Yes, I did not go to A&M. I did not get to go to fish camp coming into college, and so got to learn a little bit more. I think I've been here long enough to know most of the A&M traditions and where they come from and things like that. But I think anybody who goes to any college can understand that transition from a senior to high school to a freshman at college. It's a big one, and it's a little bit scary, and there's a lot of questions you have. So it was just really rewarding to get to go with my wife, hear her give a great speech to the kids about transitioning into that first year, and kind of watch some kids bond, make some new friends. I know when I went to college, there was a orientation type camp, but there was actually an orientation, and there was several guys who were in my wedding last year who I met at that orientation. So I know how important some of those early life things are. So it was fun. It was really hot. But really great to meet some of these counselors and get to know some of them. So it was a lot of fun. Shout out Fish Camp Session G Yellow Camp Brown.
There you go. Were there any interesting A&M facts that you did not know that you learned?
Oh gosh.
I'm putting you on the spot now.
I mean, like I said, I've been here. This is going to be my seventh football season, so think
You
I
know the
think
basics.
I might know all of them. Um, the one that I knew that I knew was I knew the whole wildcatting story. I knew
Oh,
what all that meant already, so I think I impressed some people with that. Um, yeah. So no, I think I was pretty squared away actually.
I didn't go to fish camp. I went to A&M. I did not go to fish camp. I had friends who were fish camp counselors. And of course, when you hear about fish camp, you hear about the iconic and legendary Iceberry Blue. Travis, does Iceberry Blue actually live up to the hype?
It is pretty good. So, fish camp's at this Methodist Lakeview. It's a Methodist kind of church retreat camp out in East Texas. And if you've ever been out to a camp, they have these like knockoff juices, like
Yeah.
like generic brand juices and whatnot. And they have one. I think it's supposed to be kind of like a Powerade knockoff, maybe like a blue Powerade knockoff, but it's called Iceberry Blue. And actually, it lives up. Like if that was a Sonic option, I might choose it. I'm just saying. Like it was pretty good. I've heard rumors, and I might get some people in trouble with this, of counselors like running back in there and filling their whole like Nalgene up with it to take it home so they could have a little bit when they get home to relive that nostalgia. So it's pretty good. But I worked some summer camps when I was in college. That had a little bit younger demographic, a kind of a high school summer camp at another Methodist church camp retreat place up in North Texas. And it's just fun. It's all about, being excited, getting people excited to have a fun week. And yeah, a lot of fun, man.
I can confirm my sophomore year roommate, he was a fish camp counselor and he had like a gallon jug of milk that he emptied out and he filled it up with Iceberry Blue and put it in our freezer and it sat in there for like a month. And I don't remember what happened to it, but I remember it being in there and I was like, "Why did you bring this back?" And he said,
Was he, did he pour
"Because
little, did he pour little like Iceberry Blue nightcaps every night? And,
I don't
uh,
I
you
don't know, but I'm gonna have to text him after this episode and get the answer to that story."
know,
Anyway, there has been a ton of things that have happened for A&M football as preseason practice has been underway for what, about 3 weeks now, Travis? Um,
yeah.
let's just dive right into it. I think the first thing we can get into is the quarterback competition because it is still not officially settled, although I think that there are allusions to where it could be heading.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone expects it to be Connor Wigman's job to lose. It's Connor Wigman and Max Johnson. Of course, the interesting thing, the quirk about all of this is that this will be Max Johnson's fourth college season. Uh, but he's listed as a sophomore, same as Connor Wigman, who played last year. There was a transfer. He had a medical, he redshirted a year, had a medical red shirt, and so that's why Max Johnson is registered as a sophomore. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle to all of this. But I did a story. We have our A&M special section coming out here in a couple weeks. I did a story on this quarterback battle, and it's pretty interesting. I think everyone kind of expects Connor Wigman, and just kind of by the eye test saw, hey, the offense moved better against Connor with Connor Wigman back there than it did Max Johnson or Haynes King. The stats kind of back it up. We look over at Pro Football Focus, the football analytics website, and they have their own grading formula. Connor Wegman graded out as the best quarterback in both pass run and offense. Well, not run. Haynes King was the best runner, but better than Max Johnson. But the ones that really sparked my attention was Connor Wegman release time on average was 2.84 seconds. That's like a full hundredths, 10 hundredths of a second faster than Max Johnson. And he had a turnover worthy plays. He actually averaged the percentage about 6.1 turnover worthy plays, but he didn't throw an interception, which shows to me a little bit more of that gunslinger mentality, a little bit more willing to take a risk, but made the right decisions. Because he didn't have any turnovers last year. Max Johnson only had average 2 turnover worthy play percentage, which I know that's not necessarily a great stat, but I think when you pair that with the fact that he had no interceptions, that it shows that there's a little bit more risk reward there with Connor Wegman, and I like that a little bit better. He also had exponentially better deep passing numbers. I believe Max Johnson actually only completed 2 passes. He only completed 2 passes beyond 20 yards. No, actually, it was just 1 pass over 20 yards. He was 1 for 4 past 20 yards. Connor Wegman was 5 for 14, I believe, beyond 20 yards. So you have a little bit more of that deep threat. And I know we might talk a little bit about wide receivers, or either if we don't, they have some speed guys now. They have some guys that can stretch the field, and they're going to probably need to be able to make a lot of those deep throws this year.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned those wide receivers. You and I were at the open practice at Kyle Field about a week and a half ago, and I mean, the guy that everybody's talking about right now is Noah Thomas. And just from watching him and some of those one-on-one drills, some of the 7-on-7 and even the 11-man drills, I mean, you can see why Jimbo and some of these other players are raving about him. I mean, he can make some plays, and they talked about in the spring of the type of player he was becoming. Of course, we only got a small sample size of that because he got knocked out of the game pretty quickly in the maroon and white game. But he's a guy that I think everybody's kind of watching and waiting to see what he can do on the field this fall.
Yeah, Noah Thomas grades on PFF as the 5th best Aggie from last year in not dropping balls. He did a really good job of controlling passes, and that's something that they've needed. They've had problems with drops the last couple of seasons. So it will be interesting to see with Bobby Petrino, new offense, quarterback who can make a few more of the throws, assuming Connor Wegman is the guy that wins it. Are they going to spread things out a little bit? If you look at their pass charts from last season, no matter who the quarterback was, it was basically in the middle of the field from 5 yards and from 5 to 10 yards. And that's where the majority, they were running crossing routes. They were running play action passes over the middle. And almost all of their receiving yards came within 5 yards and 10 yards down the middle of the field. So it will be interesting to see how they can spread that out a little bit, and if they can get some verticality to that too.
I think the biggest question of the offseason surrounding A&M has been, what's going to happen with this offense? Who is really going to be in charge, whether it's Jimbo Fisher or Bobby Petrino? And I think that was finally settled when we heard from Bobby Petrino at A&M's preseason kind of local media day about a week and a half ago ahead of that open practice.
Yeah, it's interesting how coy Jimbo Fisher has been with the whole who's going to call plays, what the offense is going to look like. It was kind of a talking point at SEC media days when you did have some guys who were bringing in some new coordinators, some head coaches, and they would talk. Bringing in a defensive coordinator, they're going to stay with a base 3-4, those kinds of things that Jimbo Fisher did not want to get into. I mean, he was asked if it's going to be a little bit more spread like Bobby Petrino's been in the past, or if it's going to be a little bit more play action under center heavy like Jimbo Fisher has been kind of attached to. And Jimbo Fisher said, Bobby Petrino runs a lot under center. I don't know if the stats and the film would necessarily back that up, but it does seem like Bobby Petrino's been handed over the keys. He played a little coy when we talked to him, saying it's a collaborative effort. They script a lot of stuff, which is true for the most part. But the telling thing is, he said he's been calling all the plays in practice, and you're not going to switch. You're not going to give a guy full reins in practice to call plays and then pull that back in the season. The thing that he said that actually intrigued me the most was when he was asked about if he was going to be in the press box or not, because he said he's leaning towards the press box or the coach's booth, which is over on the west stands of Kyle Field. But he said it kind of falls in with what's the demeanor of his quarterbacks especially when something goes wrong. Are they able to shake it off quickly? Are they able to kind of dissect what they did wrong quickly or not? And so I think that'll be telling to see maybe where these quarterbacks are in their development or how much the coaches trust them, depending on in that first game, if we see that Bobby Petrino's up in the booth or if we see him on the sidelines.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also like you said, it's been telling in practice, just the small sample sizes that we've gotten to see. I mean, Bobby is right there front and center in the middle of things with those guys, where in the past that was Jimbo. I mean, Jimbo was right there coaching them every single play, every single move they made. And now that's Petrino. Jimbo's still around. We were at the open practice and the quarterbacks were kind of doing their individual drills and Jimbo was kind of watching from maybe about 10, 15 yards away, just kind of observing, but he wasn't right there in the middle of it where he has been in the past. And so I think that all that is to say that, yeah, you're right, Travis. I think it's pretty clear that Bobby's going to be the main voice leading this offense moving forward, and I think everybody's curious to see how it's going to play out.
I think it's interesting too, the fact that we haven't been able to see a lot of practices this year. And I know when we go in, it's just limited normally to the first 15 minutes, save for that one open practice that they had for everybody. But typically in the past, when we've gone, they do some 11 wide offensive drills where you kind of get to see or get an idea of who's running with the ones, who's running with the twos. I think that can change when we leave, but at least from our perspective. And typically in the past, when there has been a quarterback battle, you've seen the quarterbacks alternate. You'll see one day it's, one guy running with the ones, and the next day it's the other guy. I'm not saying that that's not happening because we don't have enough sample size. We're not going multiple days in a row, but it is interesting that every time that we've gone, Connor Wegman has been with the ones. If I'm not mistaken, you've gone to maybe one or two more than I have. You can maybe correct me on that, but I from every note that I've taken, Connor Wegman has been running with the ones.
Yeah, that seems to be the trend that I'm seeing. And I'm sure Max is getting some the one reps in the scrimmages that we don't get to go to. But yeah, from what we've been able to see, and as we're recording this, A&M's going to have media access this afternoon for practice, and that's something we'll be looking into when we go. But yeah, I think you're right, Travis, that it's mostly been Connor we've seen running with that one offense. I think something that we've kind of had our eye on and, I think maybe lost in the shuffle a little bit has been what's going to happen with this offensive line. And as we've gone through fall camp, it's certainly continued to be a work in progress. And I'll say it, Travis, I think the only spot that is locked down is Trey Zune at left tackle and maybe Bryce Foster at center.
Yeah, there's been a lot of shuffling there. I think Trey Zune has done a pretty good job from what we can seen. Nobu is a guy who's kind of stepped up and been in there, and Bisantis is the guy that stepped in there and has gotten some first team reps. Bryce Foster, I think you said it's probably slotted in to be a one, but he's been a little bit banged up. He missed spring. They've been working out Nabu at center there and getting some reps, and Chase Bisantis, as Ruben Fothery has been slow to get back into the swing of things, has been. So it could be a situation where we start to see some of those guys get a little bit of playing time early and see where they fit in. But you would think Ruben Fothery, Layden Robinson, Foster, and Trey Zune for sure are slotted in there and guys to go. That's been the thing that I've said all season, is that this A&M team is going to go the way that the offensive line does. Because last year they were so bad that it was hard for any of the quarterbacks necessarily to get in a rhythm, to have enough time to let plays develop, to get things going. Their pass blocking was not good. Run blocking was a little bit better, still not great. And so if that offensive line can step up, they have the weapons offensively outside to move the ball, score some points, and keep up with teams this year like they weren't necessarily able to last year. It just depends on if that offensive line has made improvements. They didn't really bring in anybody from the outside from the transfer portal. They do have freshmen in Basantis, who has kind of stepped up and started taking some first team reps because of some injury. So that could potentially help. But I'm just really curious to see how much of the strides they've been able to make over this offseason. Because I think that's going to be the biggest question mark of the whole season, is what is the offensive line going to do?
A guy that Jimbo raved about the other day was Demetrius Crownover at tackle, and just he mentioned him multiple times, like, and it kind I think it kind of caught a bunch of people by surprise, like Crownover all of a sudden. Like, I mean, he wasn't really a guy that I think has been on our radar, but clearly he's become one of the guys that's emerging to possibly push for some playing time here, where A&M's kind of still playing maybe a little musical chairs, trying to figure out who their starting five's going to be.
Which is interesting because Crownover is also a guy that they kind of tried out as a blocking tight end a little bit last year too,
Hmm.
and kind of have moved him around a little bit. So yeah, that's another interesting one to look out for on that offensive line.
He's a big dude. He's a
Yeah,
really big dude, and his brother's a pretty big running back too.
yeah, exactly. I just think it's interesting. We're going a little bit back to the look at Pro Football Focus. There wasn't an A&M offensive lineman last year that graded above a 68 in blocking of any, or excuse me, above a 72 in blocking of any type. Run blocking was a little bit better. Pass blocking, not so great.
Tight end has all of a sudden become a point of discussion for the Aggies, with Donovan Green suffering that season-ending ACL injury in the scrimmage on Saturday. But I guess fortunately, if you're A&M, they've got some options to choose from going forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even it's Jimbo Fisher kind of confirmed last time that that Donovan Green, who is lost for the season with an ACL, was actually a little bit banged up coming out of the spring, so he was slow to get integrated back into fall camp. And because of that, Jake Johnson had been running most of the reps with the ones. And so I kind of assumed before we knew that there was some injury problems there with Donovan Green that Jake Johnson had passed him. He's put on weight. He is not the kind of string bean that he was last year. He's a big looking dude, and looks like he can be that pass catching threat that A&M needs at that position. They also have Max Wright, who is more to the blocking tight end. He's not going to necessarily go out there and catch any of those passes, but does really well in blocking. Actually, he was their fourth best pass blocker last year, as far as grades on Pro Football Focus. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Jake Johnson's an option. Theo Melnostrom, the Thor, the Swedish number one commit, or number one recruit from 2 years ago. Jimbo Fisher said he caught 8 passes in the scrimmage the other day and has kind of found his stride in America when it comes to football. could be another option there as well as far as pass catching. We talked about this a year ago on signing day when there was like 8 guys in the tight end room, and how are these guys going to get all these reps? No one has that many guys in a tight end room in 2023 in college football. But it seems like these guys are developing, and there's definitely options there. So it's yeah, they lost a key player, a guy that caught a lot of passes last year, but it's a position maybe other than defensive line where they have the most depth.
Yeah, I think Theo's a guy that really intrigues me because, last year he came in, the frame was there, but I think people forget he was like, what, 17 when he showed up to campus? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he reclassified a year ahead of schedule, and you could tell it just, he could develop into a guy maybe that could, contribute down the road, but he was not there yet last fall. And just watching him in practice this year, I mean, it just seems like he's made a ton of strides and that he has really progressed in his game. I'm not saying he's going to be the guy all of a sudden, but I'm saying I think he's a legit option if A&M goes to him this fall.
When you have to consider something too, when he was over in Sweden, he went to like an all football academy where he took some courses, but then practiced football a lot. And it was kind of a boarding school type situation, and then played club American football in Sweden, where he's playing against grown men, who, yes, most of which probably didn't, grow up in America and play in American football here, but needless to say, are good athletes and strong, big guys. And so he's gone up against strong, bigger guys, bigger than him. It doesn't surprise me that he's been able to kind of develop and take on that challenge, because he's faced in a different way some similar challenges just in his development through high school.
Well, I think we covered just about all the ground we can on the offensive side. Let's talk a little defense for a minute, Travis. And I think on defense, for me, the cornerback spot is maybe one that is kind of interesting, trying to figure out what's going to happen. It seems like Tyreek Chappelle is probably a lock to be a starter on one side. That shouldn't be a surprise. He's started as a freshman, is coming into his third year now. But on the other side, a guy that's emerging that I think is interesting, and somebody that Jimbo mentioned in his press conference this week is Javon Thomas, the freshman out of South Oak Cliff, and uh, that I don't know if I'm surprised. I guess maybe I just wasn't expecting it because I that's where A&M really hit the transfer portal hard this offseason was cornerback. They brought in Tony Grimes, Josh DeBerry, and Sam McCall. Guys they're all from ACC schools with a good amount of experience, and then kind of here coming in out, maybe a little out of the blue is this true freshman from South Dallas with a couple state titles to his name.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of thought it was Tony Grimes' position to lose, but we're hearing about Sam McCall, Josh DeBerry, Javion Thomas, and so I don't think anybody's ever really been worried about the secondary. You have Damani Richardson coming back. You have Bryce Anderson. You have plenty of guys in that secondary, especially at safety. You have Tyreek Chappelle coming back. There was experience there. Now it's interesting they went out and got so much more experience because they needed to grab a guy or two, but they grabbed a lot of guys, and so they did have one of the top ranked pass defenses in the country last year. It's a little bit skewed because of how easily teams were able to run against the Aggies. They didn't really pass it a lot. You go back to that Auburn game where they threw the first pass they threw in the game was like with a minute left in the first half. And so some of that is skewed, but they did bring back talent. You still had to make plays to be able to get that highly ranked. And so I think that that's one of those situations that kind of no matter where they go there, it's probably going to be a plus for them because I have no real question marks about the secondary. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think nailing down that other cornerback spot is definitely the biggest question mark. But aside from that, I mean, as you look at safety, for example, I think safety is where they have a ton of depth because oh, that's I did not mean to play that. Um, I'm just trying to pull up Javon Thomas's stats from South Oak Cliff last year because he played a little bit on offense too. Um,
Mhm.
he uh, I think when you look at safety, you obviously have Damani coming back. You have Jordan Gilbert coming back, and then Bryce Anderson's expected to step into that nickel kind of star position for Antonio Johnson, who went to the NFL draft, of course. And then waiting in the wings, you've got Jacoby Matthews, who's really tall, really long, and really big. That dude is huge. And then you got Jared Kerr, who is just a really good athlete. So I think at safety, A&M's pretty good. For me, it's that second cornerback spot that I'm really curious about to see what they're gonna do. Looking at South Oak Cliff last year, Javon Thomas, he played both ways, carried the ball some, had 5 touchdowns, and then on defense, if I can pull that up, um, where is he? Here he is. I mean, just a really good season overall, all things considered. And he's just a really good athlete when you look at it. I mean, just watching them in the state championship game the last 2 years, because we were up there covering College Station at the same time. He just really good athlete for sure. So I think that second cornerback spot, as I've said, is kind of the one that I'm looking at.
And you have to take into account here too that both Mike Elko and I believe DJ Durkin play with a boundary field corner system, and so playing into which of those guys can fit into that specific position role. I want to say Tyreek Chappelle was usually the boundary corner last season, and so just trying to kind of fit into who can play field side, play with a little bit more room, is going to be the guy that you're going to want to fill that other position.
Something I think that might have flown a little under the radar this offseason is that, DJ Durkin, he's coaching linebackers now with Tyler Santucci going to Duke to be with Mike Elko. And something that something that I find interesting is, that seems to be A&M's thinnest position yet again. They brought in a lot of young linebackers, but and they have Edgerrin Cooper and Chris Russell coming back, but behind them, they're really relying on some youth. I'm curious to see what having Durkin, the defensive coordinator there with them on a day-to-day basis can maybe do to possibly bolster that position, one that they need to step up this fall.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I think is going to be interesting with Durkin too is if he's going to get a little bit more aggressive in his play calling. I think the defense has the tools there to be successful and be a good defense. But I talked to Will Rogers at SEC Media Days, and I said, okay, so you played against Elko, you played against Durkin. What are some of the differences, and what made you successful last season against Durkin? And he said Elko is always going to bring some exotic stuff. He's going to bring stuff from places you're not expecting, and that throws you a little bit off guard. He said Durkin doesn't really bring a whole lot of pressure from crazy places. It's a lot of times a 4-man rush, and then with against Mississippi State in their air raid, both when he was at Ole Miss and again when he was at A&M, put up that 3-man front. And he said I knew exactly what was coming. It was the same thing, and it wasn't a whole lot of pressure outside of the 3 rushers up front. And so I'd be curious to see if he gets a little bit more aggressive, because pass rush was not something they were very good at last year, and they might need a little bit of that help, even with the good defensive line that they have. Getting some guys from linebacker, maybe a corner blitz, maybe a safety blitz, bringing some guys from different angles to help out that defensive line moving forward. That's the thing that I'm the most curious about from that defense perspective.
Well, Travis, let's shift gears for the last few minutes of the podcast this week. Let's talk about the Johnny Manziel Netflix documentary that came out a couple weeks back. You, of course, got to watch the doc a little bit ahead of time in your privileged media role, and got to talk with the producer of the documentary itself. What were some of your takeaways, and just, a little bit from your conversation with the producer?
Yeah, I think that there was anything, if you haven't seen it yet, I guess spoiler alerts, but a lot of the things that people heard about, the rumors, the whispers, the things people were talking about on Twitter and message boards about what was going on with Johnny, most of those things came to light that, yeah, that was happening. He did that. It was that crazy. I think that's a key part of it. But, you know, I think when you talk about the documentary as a work of journalism and a work of art, I guess. I really liked the quote that they used at the very end. It was from Johnny's first media availability. For those of you go back and remember, you know, we weren't, or the media, I wasn't down here yet, but the local media wasn't able to talk to Johnny up until right before the bowl game his freshman year because someone didn't let freshmen talk. And so during that press conference, he said something. Someone asked him about if he's bought into this whole Johnny football thing, and first interesting point to that was he said, you know, oh, I haven't really bought into this whole Johnny football thing, pause, that has swept the nation and all over Aggie land, which you don't really say something has swept the nation if you haven't, you know, like bought into, you know, that was an interesting contradiction, just kind of peeking into Johnny's little bit into his thinking in his head. But he said, you know, I'm just a guy from Kerrville who likes hanging out with my buddies and being a normal college student. And if that wasn't him telling us who he was before he actually showed us who he was, I don't know what is, because the whole kind of point of the documentary is that for the most part, football was a means to an end from him. He was good at it, and he was a good competitor, but he liked the the fame and the hype and the parties and the everything that came along with being a winning football quarterback at a major university. He liked being with his buddies and being a normal college student necessarily more than he liked being a football player. I mean, it's telling when they said that the Cleveland Browns had an app on the iPad so they could track how much time their players were watching film and doing stuff like that, and his was zero. Eric Burkhart, his agent, said they told him it was 0 minutes. He did not study film while he was in the NFL, and but he was going to Vegas the night before games and stuff like that. So stuff that we normally knew. But the thing that kind of stood out to me, and I posed this question to Ryan Duffy when I talked to him, is so much of this show, of this documentary, was talking to people in Manziel's close circle who helped him cover things up. When you talk about Uncle Nate's, you know, Nate Fitch, his buddy, who was kind of his handler through college, who came up with this idea to say that his family had all of this old oil money, and that's how he was sitting courtside at a different NBA game every week and partying with Drake and stuff like that. And that was,
Having the
I mean, they're not,
Mercedes.
and the Mercedes. It's not that they're not well to do, but they don't have that kind of money. That was just a spin to cover up him signing autographs and getting money when that was illegal in the NCAA. You had Eric Burkhart, his agent, talking about how you know, they were pitching to, you know, they had his dad fake a heart attack to have him come away from the combine because he had slipped up and might not have been able to pass a drug test at the combine. And so the whole movie is uncovering lies to where when you get to the end of it and you're kind of talking about looking at Johnny putting his foot forward and a new step and stuff like that, you kind of go, okay, either this is true or this is just the next step in the spin. This is the next comeback season. And I asked Ryan Duffy, how did you parse through and try to figure out what was true and what was more lies? Because that's what his whole career has been. And he said it wasn't really his concern on part of this project. It is called Untold. It is the focal point of it is to get the first person accounts of what is going on in these people's lives and in these situations from their own mouths. And so he wasn't necessarily, it wasn't his job to adjudicate the stories. So to that point, I kind of left it going, okay, but is it true? You know, is he really, they kind of painted him as this empathetic figure at the end, which to some extent, anybody who's dealing with mental health issues is an empathetic figure. But is it true? Is he taking step forwards to better his life? I don't know. You kind of just left me feeling like what of this is true, what is not, who's telling the truth, who's exaggerating things. It gave some closure to some things, but not really everything. Alex, what do you think?
I definitely thought it was interesting. I mean, Johnny played at A&M when I was a freshman in high school, and just, the mystic of his figure was just, enamored in the town growing up. I mean, he was just this mythical being, it seemed like. And so for me, it was cool to watch it and just kind of, see, the behind the scenes, some of it, whether or not it was true or not. Um, I definitely thought that there was a lot left to be desired, though. It's a 72-minute documentary, but it easily could have been like 3 hours with three 1 hour episodes that, you know, one episode could have been his rise and his time at A&M. The second episode could have been focused on, you know, starting after the bowl game against Duke, the crazy comeback in the Chick-fil-A Bowl, uh, the pre-draft stuff and his time with the Browns. And then the third episode could have been, about his post NFL shenanigans. I definitely thought that they rushed through a lot, and it definitely seemed like they missed out on getting to talk with some really critical people. Kevin Sumlin was not in the documentary. Not sure if he declined to be in the documentary or not. Uh, you know, they didn't include any of Johnny's teammates at A&M or the Browns, nor did they even really acknowledge the fact that, Johnny had this fantastic supporting cast, especially his freshman year at A&M, between the offensive line, Mike Evans. There was hardly any mention of Mike Evans. Johnny Manziel is not Johnny Manziel without Mike Evans. I think anyone who followed A&M at that point knows that. And I thought Eric Burkhart was fantastic. I mean, the whole stuff about him talking about, the Browns private workout before the draft, and he was having to run routes, and he had that Twitter thread that he kind of elaborated on some of those things. That was fantastic. Good on Netflix for getting in touch with Nate Fitch. He kind of seemed to be like this guy that, people knew about, but nobody really knew a lot about him. And I feel like Nate really filled in a lot of the blanks. But I definitely thought that they kind of sold it a little short. I thought our friend Sam Kahn at The Athletic wrote a really good review on the things that the documentary missed. And I think I agree with a lot of what Sam had to say, if anyone has read that. Um, but I think the bottom line is that, you know, the legend of Johnny is real. He was kind of this legendary being at his time at A&M, and I think the documentary kind of leaves you wondering, like, yeah, like, what who is this guy? And I think his legend's gonna live on, because that's just kind of the guy he is, for better or worse. That's just kind of my take on it.
He was very charismatic, and that's one thing that Ryan Duffy had to say, is that no matter, you know, this guy's whole story, you know, uh where he's been and what he's done, and you kind of sit down with him thinking he's going to be one thing, and he said he's really personal and he's really enjoyable to, he's charismatic, he always had the right thing to say. And so there's part of me that that kind of sits back and says, what exactly is the mythos, the legend of Johnny Manziel and Johnny Football? Yeah, it's a Heisman Trophy winner, the first freshman Heisman Trophy winner, and that's nothing to scoff at. That is legendary in its own right. But how much of that legend is myth, is creative narrative, is spin? It's just hard for me to wrap my mind around what it exactly is and what it isn't. And for that reason, it to me, it kind of discredits itself a little bit. But I don't know. I think it was, uh, for the most part, to Duffy's credit, for the most part, it's a part of this untold series where actually, I've through the week this week, I've kind of gone back and watched some of the other ones, some of the old ones. There's some a really one on Jake Paul is actually really, really well
I,
done.
I want to watch that
Um,
one.
yeah, it's really good.
I also want to watch this one
But
on Florida that's coming up.
true, true. But most of them are about 70 minutes long. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Manti Te'o one, which is one that Duffy did, is actually 2 parts. But I think it's the only one that's 2 parts. So to their credit, I mean, I don't know how much creative leeway they were able to have if they could have made it a 3-part thing. But for the most part, in what they were doing, they had a little bit of a structure and a template already, because this is kind of the second wave of these Untold series. And so it seems to me like there was a little bit of constraints on how long you could go, how many people they include in it. And so yeah, I think that that should be mentioned as well when we're talking about kind of critiquing the movie and the documentary as well.
That's fair. Hey, how about this too? 2 out of the 3 Heisman Trophy finalists from 2012 are now subjects of the Untold documentary series. You mentioned Manti Te'o. It's him, Johnny Manziel. They need to do one on Colin Klein just to go 3 for 3 and get the trifecta. I don't know what his untold story is, but I'm sure he's got one.
Well, and that's the interesting part. And I'm actually kind of surprised that they might not have had a quote or two from Te'o just about the Heisman thing, because if you go back and watch a lot of them, they kind of do them in pairs together, where they did one on Tim Doherty, the NBA ref who was betting on games and stuff like that. And then they also did one on the Malice at the Palace, which actually Tim Doherty was officiating at that game, the fight between the Pistons and the Pistons and the Pacers. And so they used quote. You could tell he was wearing the same thing that he was in both documentaries. They used quotes from both of those. There was one on the one on Jake Paul, and then the one on Christy Martin, the famous female boxer. They got Mike Tyson to talk about both of. So they kind of paired some together, and so while they didn't use Te'o quotes or anything while they were paired at that same time, it does seem like the thought process kind of went with groupings in this way in some of these series.
Needless to say, I think everybody should watch it.
It's good.
It's a good documentary.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good documentary. Travis, I think we covered it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we've talked about just about everything we can. A&M, we're recording this on Thursday. The A&M athletics schedule officially begins today.
It
Texas
does.
A&M soccer facing number 6, Florida State?
I know they're playing Florida State
today at Ellis Field. So the athletic season is officially underway. Volleyball here to start soon, and we're rocking and rolling. Should be a pretty good season for the soccer team, and volleyball has a new coach, so we'll have to see how they shift and adjust to him.
Yeah, and you can read some season previews on theeagle.com. I believe you and Robert Cessna wrote a couple of those this week for maybe Tuesday's paper.
That is correct.
All right. Well, that's another episode of the Aggie Nation Podcast. Be sure to read all of our coverage on Texas A&M athletics and more at theeagle.com. For Travis Brown, I'm Alex Miller. We'll see you next time.